This isn't my usual kind of content. However, chat really seems to like watching me argue with people, so we're doing this. Not too long ago, I was introduced to the existence of PragerU, a highly conservative YouTube channel attempting to portray itself as a legitimate university. They have a plethora of short video essay style posts on a large array of topics, ranging from a 5-minute biography of President Trump to videos arguing that women shouldn't be on the front lines in combat. They also have a video titled "The Truth About Gender-Affirming Care," and it is just as bad as you think. The video is hosted by Kaylee McGee-White, an editor of the Washington Examiner. The video opens with Kaylee stating that gender-affirming care includes the sterilization, chemical castration, and mutilation of children under 18. Now, I don't know about you, but from my perspective, a queer individual who has several genderqueer friends, it's just blatantly wrong. I hardly even had to do any research to prove that it's wrong. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, let me set a clear understanding for what gender-affirming care is. According to the Government of Canada's website, under their health subsection, gender-affirming care is defined as the social, psychological, and health supports and care that affirms a person's gender identity. Gender-affirming care is much, much more nuanced than just sex change and the sex change surgery. Hell, something as little as a haircut is considered gender-affirming care. And that goes for anybody, cis, genderqueer, anyone. If a cisgendered heterosexual man were to say that having long hair makes him feel emasculated, no reasonable person would deny them the option of simply cutting their hair because it's too progressive or too feminine. I myself am a cisgendered woman who has short hair because it makes me feel better about my gender and about my gender expression. And some people probably don't like that. But all this to say, despite what PragerU wants you to think, gender-affirming care and sex change treatments are not synonymous terms. If we want to stay in the same vein as what Kaylee is talking about, let's talk specifically about sex change treatments, since this is clearly the real topic that PragerU wants to try and discuss. They bring up a few examples, namely puberty blockers, hormonal injections, and double mastectomies, weirdly. I'll start with addressing these examples specifically. Firstly, puberty blockers. Generally, they're only offered to children around the age of puberty or a little bit before, and only when the child is old enough to actually understand the concept of what puberty is. They have also been found to be largely reversible should the child change their mind. Certain exceptions obviously do exist, but those are often due to other factors, as like other medical conditions, metabolism, things like this. Second, I want to discuss hormonal injections and just hormonal therapy as a whole. These are not only proven to be safe and effective for trans people attempting to regulate their body towards their gender identity, but they aren't even specifically used for sex change. A commonly promoted form of birth control is a hormone injection you get once every 3 months. It's also not uncommon for a man with hypogonadism to receive testosterone replacements. Testosterone is a hormone. It is the most common hormone given to female to male trans, as it's usually called T. People usually shorten it to T. Testosterone shots are also reported to have less side effects than most common forms of birth control. As I'm recording this, I am on my 3rd or 4th month of taking standard combination birth control pills, which are hormonal. And I do actually have to go to the doctors to a physical to ensure that the pills are not causing any potentially harmful effects. However, the type of pills that I am taking are almost the exact same as certain estrogen pills taken by male to female trans people, and I have had people mistake my birth control for me being trans because of that. All that being said, it is a safe method, and time off the hormones, your body would slowly regulate itself back to normal, meaning that it is completely reversible. That's why birth control stops working if you stop taking it. The last thing they talk about is a double mastectomy, which, off the bat, is a weird choice for of the possible surgeries allowed for minors for sex change. And unlike the other two examples they listed, there really aren't any health concerns that arise from having a double mastectomy. Usually mastectomies remove more potential health issues than they have. The only potential health issues I could find around what could happen after a mastectomy had more to do with recovering from the surgery itself, and not specifically that it was a mastectomy. I was given basically the same list of potential issues after I had an appendectomy, which is just a fancy word for saying having my appendix taken out. A mastectomy is a very common treatment for patients suffering from breast cancer, and oftentimes you'll find people who get double mastectomies in advance to try and prevent getting breast cancer in the first place. Studies have shown that a bilateral mastectomy, a fancy word for a double mastectomy, or removing both breasts, is up to 95% effective in preventing breast cancer in patients with the BRCA1 or BRCA2 genes, and up to 90% effective on patients who have a family history of breast cancer. So what does PragerU have against mastectomies? Probably blatant misogyny. Kaylee goes on to talk about how the Boston Children's Hospital allegedly had a video on their website promoting a hysterectomy as a sex change treatment for minors. The hospital vehemently refused, pointing out that all genital or bottom surgeries are illegal for minors, and stated the video made no mention of patient ages. This was proven to be correct. The video they had found had been reposted and taken out of context by another creator attempting to spread transphobia online under the account called Libs of TikTok. At this point, I am genuinely starting to doubt how much research PragerU did for their original video, if any. Kaylee follows up on her comment about children's hospitals by talking about a pediatric gender clinic in the UK that closed down, as if that alone is proof that gender-affirming care is bad. She doesn't actually, however, stop and explain why the Tavistock Center closed down. According to most news centers I could find, the Tavistock Center, also known as the GIDS, Gender and Identity Development Service, was ordered to close down by spring of 2023 due to unethical practices, and was slated to be replaced by new centers, which would run alongside and with other pediatric hospitals to ensure the care was given was of medical standard. The clinic wasn't closing because it was working in gender-affirming care. The clinic was closing because it wasn't deemed a medically safe system for gender-affirming care. The fact that Kaylee does not bother to differentiate this clearly means PragerU knows what they're trying to say, and they are purposely hiding things. Ironically enough, after giving this woefully incomplete review of the Tavistock Center and that situation, Kaylee says this.
In no other part of the medical world is it considered acceptable or even legal to damage the body of a healthy person irreversibly.
Quick vocabulary lesson. What is circumcision? According to the Canadian Pediatric Society, circumcision involves the partial or complete removal of the foreskin. I'd consider that as damage to a healthy person. I don't know about you. And I hear the complaints. Circumcision is a cultural thing. It doesn't actually harm the child, etc., etc., etc. By Kaylee's own definition, it doesn't need to harm the person. Simply damage them. Removal of skin counts as damage. And if that doesn't convince you, I'll give you guys a bonus example. To keep on theme, we'll have another vocabulary lesson. What does intersex mean? Thank you to the United Nations Human Rights website for the definition here. People who are intersex are people who are born with sex characteristics such as sexual anatomy, reproductive organs, hormonal patterns, and/or chromosomal patterns that do not fit typical binary notions of male or female bodies. So why the vocab lesson? Arguably, a person can be born intersex and still be completely healthy. Most estimates put the percentage of intersex individuals in the world at about 1.7%. However, it is unfortunately and very sadly common that intersex children are given unnecessary surgical procedures to remove their intersex traits and make them appear to conform more accurately to binary sex stereotypes. Often during this person's infancy where they cannot consent or argue against said surgery. To quote the United Nations Human Rights website again, these often irreversible procedures can cause permanent infertility, pain, incontinence, loss of sexual sensation, and lifelong mental suffering, including depression. Clearly the problem PragerU has isn't not damaging a healthy person's body. Otherwise, PragerU would be arguing against the mutilation of intersex individuals as well. They barely even touch on the fact that intersex individuals exist. Their only comment is that, aside from a collect few, a gender spectrum doesn't exist. Huh? Kaylee proceeds to go on this rant about how sex is integral, and it's not something that's assigned at birth. However, she makes the exact same hilarious blunder that President Trump said more recently. And if anybody can remember, she says, and I quote, "Sex is an integral part of who we are, right from the moment of conception. Surprise, boys, you're not boys at all, you're women now, suck it up." I had a good laugh at that one too. Because what they clearly didn't research at all is that at conception, a human being, regardless of chromosomes, begins from the same developmental starting point. Up until about 6 to 7 weeks of gestation, all fetal genitalia are phenotypically female. Therefore, at conception, we are all female. It is only until about 6 or 7 weeks of pregnancy that male features begin to develop. Watching PragerU's video on gender-affirming care was really jarring to me when I first watched it. I come from an incredibly accepting family. I have queer family members. I have transgender friends. I am a part of the LGBTQ community myself. When I first watched this video, which is filled to the brim with such blatant misinformation and fear-mongering, it's just sad. I don't understand it. I don't understand why society seems to have a problem with transgender people. How can seemingly educated people look at medical and university sources and then preach the opposite? It's insane to me. If you're someone who watches or believes PragerU for whatever reason, I implore you, do a couple of Google searches on what they're talking about. See how many sources you find against what they're preaching. read those sources analytically and decide for yourselves if PragerU makes more sense or if a university does. I can only lead a horse to water. I hope my response cleared up that water a bit. Be smarter. We need to be smarter. They are trying to convince us to teach PragerU to our children in schools, and it is such blatant misinformation and almost propagandizing. We can't let that happen. We cannot let them put this into schools if we want our children to be truly educated and intelligent and able to think for themselves. Be smarter.